Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Today we're going to talk about math and Digimon. We're going to talk about the original virtual pets. We're going to talk about the anime, the manga, the games, both video games and the trading card game, as well as so many other things along the way. Digimon is one of my favorite franchises out there, and I haven't talked about it at length on my channel until now, so I want to rectify that. You're free to assume that there will be spoilers ahead, although I have so much that I'm going to talk about that I am probably not going to have time to really get into all that too much. But I wanted people to be safe about that, so just assume that there could be, because I don't want to hold back either. And assume that there will be spoilers for all things Digimon. That being said, I plan to have a blast, and I hope that you do the same. So, without further ado, let's talk about math and Digimon. Okay, so with Digimon, it is such a massive multimedia franchise, and it has had some staying power. Starting off with in 1997 with the virtual pets, it keeps on going. And honestly, I think that's a good thing. Again, it's one of my favorite franchises out there. So when it comes to the virtual pets, the idea was that they were supposed to be pretty much a version of the Tamagotchi, but for boys, with the idea being that Tamagotchi was geared towards girls, or more so girls and boys. But I'd argue that that's something that, people thought was more of an issue than it was, because, like, I mean, I had a Tamagotchi and then later a Digimon. And I'm sure the same could be said for other people as well. Um, but anyway, so with the Digimon virtual pets, they're pretty much Tamagotchis, with the idea being that you could fight. And so here's the thing, right? Not only is there math and, um, you know, the Digivice that you have, right? Like in constructing that and deciding its shape, how much it gets stored data wise, as well as how many buttons it has, how many icons are on the screen, and how everything interacts with everything else. Not only is there math and all that, but there's math in the Digimon themselves, and them being data. And that's something that has, in a very meta sense, been carried over to the different franchises. But back to the virtual pets before we branch out. The idea is like, so you had your Digimon, right? You start off at their lowest level pretty much, and you train them up to get stronger and digivolve, right? You feed them, you take care of their droppings, you give them like food or vitamins, but you're managing everything, right? Because like you can't give them too much food or too much vitamins, because on one hand, right, they'll get stronger but they'll also get slower. um in any case, there's math and all of that, right? There's math in managing Digimon, math in feeding them and not feeding them too much, math in monitoring their their health, their energy, their different stats outside of those things. There's math in the battles themselves, the back and forth between linking up with other Digimon. And there's math in having your Digimon survive, because they can in fact die within the virtual pet. Um, I mean, they can die outside that in other pieces of the franchise, but we'll get into that too. So yeah, it's like the virtual pets happen. They were great. They were fun. And there's just like a lot of math and like not only the battles but the maintenance of the Digimon, and then like I said, how the Digivice is designed, and then of course like how things were programmed for it, as well as like the interface you're using. So even if you didn't like think about it in depth, there's math in that virtual pet all across the board, and math in just what a Digimon is in the first place. And then when you branch that out to what the digital world is, as we see in like other pieces of media, it's inherently mathematical. Because the idea is, right, the digi world is a parallel universe, that is connected to our networks of communication, right? And we're dealing with networks, we're dealing with data, and all these things are inherently mathematical. And if we go from the virtual pets into the show, we'll talk about some of that more and just how it all goes, right? And then branch out from there. So with the show, you get more of that origin, right? And it's just like, hey, Digimon are inherently mathematical, because we're dealing with computers, we're dealing with communication, we're dealing with data. and all these things are math based, and I think that's really cool. And then for the anime itself, like I mean, you see math across the board, right? Because again, like the Digimon, their data, um, and you know, there's other things to that too, right? Because you can get into the actual type of Digimon, where some are considered data, some are considered virus, some are considered vaccine, which admittedly can be confusing if you're not careful. But my whole thing is like when you're looking at that big picture, you're looking at them as packets of data, so to speak, but you know, sentient packets of data. And you could argue that we're sentient packs of data, but that's a whole nother thing for another day. Because like here we're dealing with like, hey, digital made real. Um, and so the thing is, right, like Digimon's been out for a while. And when it came out, I think like back in '99, it came out swinging. Like I think that first season of Digimon or that first series of Digimon, however you refer to, but Digimon Adventure, it came out swinging. I enjoyed that so much. So here's the thing, right? Not only is there math within the Digimon and what they are and what they compose of, there's math in the anime in the world that is portrayed in the anime. Again, just like the digital stuff alone is mathematical, but you can also say that all the other technologies you see in that world and the way buildings are displayed and all that is mathematical in nature. And then you get to like the art itself, right? Because there's math in the scale and scope, right? Of everything. There's math in the buildings and how big they make them and how that stacks up with the characters you see. There's math in the Digimon. There's math in the consistency of size and the scale and scope of the Digimon and everything. And then there's the idea of Digivolution, right? We talked about it a little bit with the virtual pets, but if we go on, the idea with Digivolution is for the most part, you're getting a stats boost. That's one way to look at it, right? Your Digimon are getting faster, they're getting stronger. They're getting new abilities. They're able to dish out more damage and take less damage. And you see this played out in a more like open and direct way within the video games. And I feel like one of the coolest things about video games is that, you're taking these ideas, you're taking kind of like some of the behind the scenes math and you're making that more explicit and you're gamifying it. And I think that's really cool. But if we go back to the anime, that's the idea with Digivolution. For the most part, the Digimon are getting stat boosts in like almost all categories, if not every category, right? And what's interesting is like how we see Digivolution depicted is it's kind of like aging, and you have different Digimon, getting more powerful and kind of staying in that form. Like the big exception was the Digimon that we see with the Digi Destined or Chosen Children, whatever you want to refer to them as. They are able to go back to their rookie form and stuff like that, or lower forms in certain situations. But the idea is that they get a boost from their partners in their Digivice, right? Like the Digivice allows them to like get that upgrade, get that evolution, get those stat boosts, and get that change of form. They're usually bigger too. Um, and then on top of that, right, like there's layers to it because you have the thing like the crest in adventure where you get not just like the rookie and champion form, but you get to go up to the ultimate form. And like later we see the mega forms with like Metal Garurumon and War Greymon. Two of my favorite Digimons with Metal Garurumon getting the edge. They're both awesome though. But there's like there's layers to it, right? Because you have your baby form in training, rookie, champion, ultimates, and mega. And I think there are some differences if you go back to the original Japanese stuff, but the idea is like there's tiers, right? And again, this is like things that are mathematical in nature. And then like we have how things come together, right? Because with anime, you get a certain budget, right? And that affects how things are animated. It affects on like how many shots are going to be fresh versus how many are going to be repeated. And then on top of that, you have math and how the story is broken up. Like how many episodes is it going to be? How is the story going to play out? How long is each arc? How long is the program in general? Right? It's got that half an hour, or it's about a half an hour if you count commercials. About 20 or so if you don't. Right? Like standard stuff. But you have to take that into consideration, and how much money are you using on each episode and all that good stuff. And then with Digimon, it's like it's not like it exists in a vacuum. The virtual pets came first in the games all along the same time, right? And so the idea is like, hey, well, marketing, right? There's math in that and how that plays out. And then there's like not only math in the marketing, but math in how much money they're making off of the games, off of the toys, the virtual pets, the movies, you name it. And at the time, like I guess VHS and DVD sales and stuff like that, and later Blu-ray. But there's math in all that. Then there's math in the animation process itself and the idea of getting motion across. There's math in animation and the motion and the scale and the scope, getting everything to flow together. There's math in how long it takes. There's just math across the board, even if we don't always notice it, right? Because we're watching this finished product, but it took hours. It took a lot of money. It took a lot of frames. It took people storyboarding this. And then you got like voice acting involved. And there's math in that, right? Because there's math in the breathing. There's math in the volume. There's math in how you're getting across the word. Sorry, the words, and so many other parts of that. There's math across the board. And then if we pivot to the games, there are a lot of different Digimon games spanning different genres, with like the top two being like RPG and like fighting. Because like that's what I think about when I think about Digimon games, right? I think about fighting games like Digimon Rumble Arena, which is kind of like a sort of like a Super Smash Brothers sort of deal. And there's math in that, and math in fighting games in general. Because you're trying to either deplete someone's health or knock them out of the ring, and you have to manage that, right? And of course, there's stats that you may see and stats that you may not see, but there's just like math inherent into that genre, and really math inherent to gaming, because not only do you have like math behind the scenes with games, like how long they take to make, how they're coded, how you're dealing with the development schedule, all that good stuff, but you have math within the different games themselves in a more direct sense, and like the genres that they embody, and the things that you're doing within those games and you as a player, right? But back to like the big types, so you get like Digimon games, like fighting games, but you also get more RPGs and different twists on that. You have like the Digimon World Series, and there's a whole plethora of games with that. And there's some pretty big RPGs, right? And I find that interesting. And then you have like Digimon Story like titles, which we're seeing more of in the U.S. because like we've seen them, but like I think there was some mislabeling with some titles being labeled Digimon World rather than Digimon Story. But anyway, the one that comes to mind for that for me is Digimon Cyber Sleuth. That's a pretty good game. It's pretty wonky sometimes with the story, but it's pretty fun. And it's an RPG, and it's got like solving mysteries in it, although it's like the mystery part could use work. But anyway, with the RPG part, right, math is such a big role in RPGs, because like you're dealing with the stats for one, and there's math in it. There's math in the stats, math in the damage you dish out, math in the damage you take, math in status elements, math in the turns that you're taking and plotting things out, math and leveling up your Digimon, um, math and items you use, math and like the Digivolutions, the different like paths you could take, because there might be different qualifications for the Digivolution. Because you might have like, oh well, you need a certain level for this Digimon to reach this point. You might need certain stats to reach this point or that point. You might need certain items to help with this point or that point. But the whole thing is like there's math across the board with RPGs, and Digimon is no exception. Whether we're talking about Digimon World or Cyber Sleuth and other things along the line. And also that reminds me of like Digimon World, like Dusk and Dawn, or Dawn and Dusk, because those were like I find it funny because right, you have Digimon and Pokemon, and you have these comparisons, even though they're different franchises. They do have overlap, and they do borrow from each other from time to time. With Digimon World, like Dawn and Dusk, like I feel like those are like the most Pokemon esque Digimon games ever. But like you had other titles that kind of have the same deal going, right? But it's just like it's kind of crazy because you were collecting multiple Digimon, and dealing with a lot of the mechanics that are similar to Pokemon. But it worked for the franchise, and they had their own spin on things. But it's not like Pokemon hasn't taken things from Digimon. Like I said, they borrow from each other. My thing is like you see fusion in Pokemon in a few games, and you see like Mega Evolution, things like that. And those both come from Digimon. And like you could argue that fusion is more general than that, but like you see it in Digimon first. I'm just saying. Um, but yeah, so or I mean, I guess depending on things, because right, you see Bill in Pokemon, which is like that's a weird thing, right? Because like he fused with a Pokemon. That was strange, but my whole thing is like, but they borrow from each other though, right? Because Mega Evolution, that's definitely a Digimon thing, that kind of made it over to Pokemon, right? But they borrow the same idea, I call it a different thing, but back to my overall thing. Like Digimon is something that's inherently mathematical, and while we're here, right? Like there's a bunch of toys that have been made, and I'm counting the virtual pet as a different thing, but you can argue that that falls into the toy category either way, right? With the toys, like there's math in how they're designed, there's math in how big they are, how much they cost. And what they do, there's math and all that, and how much money they make, right? And then there's like the trading card game. There's a lot of math in that, right? Like there's a math for how many cards you can have in a standard deck if you're playing by the rules. And I guess like some of those rules have changed over time, but like there's also math in the Digivolution, how that plays out in the course of the game. There's math in like, the damage that you dish out, the damage that you take. Um, there's math in like that whole back and forth, right? And then there's math in the cards, how they're made, what values are going to assign here or there, and the type, like data, vaccine, virus, and all that good stuff. And then there's math in you like buying those cards and deciding what you're going to do and what you're going to have in your deck if you're playing someone. And then if you were like a lot of us when we were kids and that came out, you kind of did your own thing and made up your own rules. But I feel like Digimon was easier to follow than Pokemon with the trading card rules, but they're both not bad when you look into them, right? But back then, a lot of us didn't know what we were doing, and we were just kind of rolling with it. But yeah, I do think they were cool and they were fun to collect. And the Digimon card game is like still going on in some form or another. But yeah, so there's a lot of math across the board with Digimon, and I hope that that has been made a bit more clear with my overview of things, right? It's just like math is everywhere and it's in everything, and we don't always think about it. And again, Digimon is a series where like math is kind of at the forefront because we're dealing with data in a very direct way, and I think that's cool. But there's so many other ways that math is being used that we might not think about because the truth is, math um, is what the universe is doing. It's what you and I are doing. We're just putting a name to it, just being able to talk about it in some different ways. But the truth is, the math would be there whether we acknowledge it or not. And so, as this video closes out, like, or I'm starting that process, I'd like to say that again, all the topics that I mentioned could be their own videos, and maybe will be someday. But Digimon is one of my favorite franchises, and I want to talk a little bit about some of my experiences with it over here. So I first saw it when it first premiered in the US. Like I think what 99, and it was awesome. It like had a lot going on. It was like yeah for kids, but it didn't treat you like a kid per se. Like I mean, these kids were dealing with some serious themes over Digimon, right? Like and it was wild. And there were times where like Digimon actually died. But it's a little bit more complicated than one would think, right? Because like with Digimon, like they could die, and in general, that just means their data gets reconfigured and they're reborn as a a digi egg. But it's possible for their data to be completely and totally destroyed, in which case they're dead. um, and so that can happen, and that happened throughout the series. And like I think like the stuff with the Dark Masters, it was just like the Zenith, right? It was this amazing saga that kind of cap off uh, an already amazing series, and then Digimon just kept on going, right? Like we had Adventure 2, and that was great, and it introduced different types of Digivolution because like they didn't have the crest anymore and stuff like that. So we had like things like Fusion pop up, And we had Armor, Digivolution. Um, and all those were cool. And the idea is like, hey, we're making your Digimon powerful, and we might be attributing this element to it or that element, or we might be taking two Digimon and fusing them together to make a more powerful Digimon that is probably going to be powerful for other Digimon of that caliber. Like if you fuse two champions, you're going to get an ultimate that's probably more powerful than some of the other ultimates out there. And I think that's the interesting thing too, because you have these Pokemon. I mean, sorry, oh my God, these Digimon. And I know why that happened. So we have these Digimon, and they have these different levels, and not all are created the same. And that actually made me think of Pokemon. And again, they're not the same, but there's some similarities here and there. But it made me think of Pokemon because you have like beginning form, right, and then the middle evolution, and then like the final evolution, and you might have different Pokemon at different stages, but not be the same, right? You know what I mean? Because it's like I'm trying to think of a good example. I don't know. You might have like Charizard, for instance, is a final form evolution. So is Butterfree, but they are not the same. They got different stats, among other things. And so that's where my mind was at. But again, Digimon and Pokemon are two different things. They both borrow from each other. But with Digimon in particular, it's interesting because you might have two ultimates, right? And they might be on a different caliber compared to most champion Digimon, but they're not going to be the same. You're going to have some ultimate Digimon be more powerful than some other ones. And like I think like the whole Angimon line, like they're like to me broken. And also, I talked about like death in the digital world. Can we talk about how like Leomon just seems to be destined to die in most incarnations, and that sucks. But anyway, um, so I started with Adventure, and then Adventure Two, and then Tamers, or Season Three, like Season One, Two, Three, if you prefer going by that. But with Tamers, it was like kind of weird because like they introduced like a fusion between the Digimon and their partner by the end of that, and that was like kind of wild. And they also could use like the cards to power up their Digimon. So like that's sort of cool, and there's math in that. But it was a wild thing because in Tamers, Digimon was a franchise, right? It was meta. It's like and the whole thing is like in that universe, Digimon weren't supposed to be real. It was just a really popular franchise, but then it turns out, yes, they're very real. And like I said, they could use cards to power up the Digimon and stuff like that, and it was wild. And it got really cool and brutal toward the end. I don't think they stuck the landing with the D Reaper stuff, but I think it was pretty solid overall and really dark. Um, then you got Digimon Frontier or Season 4, whatever you prefer. And that one, like, the people became the Digimon. And they had different variants, like they had the human form and the beast form and stuff like that. And then they had like the Royal Knights, and they were like taking everybody's data, to wake Lusamon and all that stuff. And it was just kind of crazy because they would just like body something, and they were like pretty much eating that data or like taking it so they could give it to Lucimon. And it was wild. You had Digimon, Data Squad. Um, there was another name for that, but I forget. But Data Squad, and that was a whole thing, and I like that one. It was kind of crazy because like the main character had to punch like Digimon to like expose their data or whatever to help his Digimon digivolve. No one else was doing that, by the way, in that series. It was just him. It was crazy. Just like this dude was out there, he punch a Digimon to help his Digimon digivolve. It was wild. But that was a crazy series. For Cross Wars, I didn't really watch all that much of it. It did not hit me the same as the other series. Um, and it's not bad, but it's just like I couldn't get with it all the way. But like, I've seen the beginning, several things in the middle, and the end. And just to be clear, right, like with Cross Wars, there's like two sub seasons, or like it's consists of two series, like, however you want to define it. And I saw like several episodes within both series or sub seasons, and the beginning and end of the whole thing. Then there was Atmon, which I admittedly didn't see. There's Digimon Try, which I'm a big fan of, but I didn't see the movie follow up, and I'm going to do that in the future. But like Digimon Try was crazy. There was some good stuff in there, and it was also pretty dark. They rebooted Digimon Adventure like back in 2020, and I haven't seen that yet, but I want to in the future. And there's probably other stuff. There's Ghost Game, which I haven't seen. Um, but yeah, so I've watched a lot of Digimon over the years. Um, and like I said, I started with the virtual pets, and like that was fun. And I played a decent amount of Digimon games, not every single game, because some of them didn't even come out over here in the States. But like, I played a decent amount. The most recent one I've played is Cyber Sleuth. I want to play Survive at some point though. But yeah, so Digimon is a great series, a great franchise. And again, it's a multimedia franchise. It's got a lot going on and it's still kicking. I hope that this video has made you think about how math is used in Digimon a little bit more, both in universe and then in the meta sense. And also, it was great getting to talk about one of my favorite franchises because, again, I haven't really, until this point, talked about it at length, which is kind of crazy because, again, I enjoy it. I grew up on Digimon, and it always finds a way to creep back in my life in one form or another. And again, my favorite Digimon is Metal Garurumon, because Metal Garurumon is the best. But seriously, there's so many Digimon, and I could see people liking different ones. So please feel free to share what your favorite Digimon is. I would like to hear. That being said, I'll see you in the future. Professor Prime out.